Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the astrological chart of the late singer Karen Carpenter. If you aren't from the era that she was big, which was primarily the 70s, then you may have seen videos of hers on YouTube or at least have heard her name. If you haven't, you definitely should check out some of her hits. Her voice is considered right up there as one of the best voices. Her vocals were smooth as honey. And as someone who was in high school in the early 80s, I have to say that I never heard Karen Carpenter sing until, probably just like 10 years ago or 20. I mean, I heard people playing songs when she died. I think she died in 1983. So I heard at that time they were doing tributes and all of that, but I did not hear her songs on the radio. And I think the reason why is that in the 70s and the early 80s, classic rock was really big, and just rock in general. And so the sound was very hard, and anything that was easy listening was put off into a whole different category. They would not play those songs in the top 40. They would have a whole separate Billboard chart and things like that. Sometimes they would, coincide, but I was more of the late 70s and beyond than the early 70s when she was in her heyday. So I'm going to talk about a few things because for those who don't know, Karen Carpenter died of anorexia in, like I said, I believe it was 1983. And it was very apparent that she was emaciated for years before her death. I think she tried to remedy things, and she might have gained a little bit of weight and looked a lot better, but then went back. And it's tragic because I think she was only in her early 30s when she passed away. So she was quite young. She was a drummer in addition to being such an amazing singer. And so what I want to look at here is there anything that indicates her singing gift? She had a problematic relationship with her mother. Is that indicated? Can I see anything in the chart about that? Can I see anything about her success as an entertainer? Is there anything to indicate why she never could find love in her life? I'm talking about romantic love, because as I understand it, she wasn't married at the time of her passing, and there was some man that she was in love with, and her mother never gave her this correspondence or something along those lines from that man, and she never ended up hooking up with him or, meeting up with him. And so her mother sounds like a real piece of work, to say the least, and like that narcissistic personality. I'm going to look at that and her anorexia itself. I've done a video that, if I think about it, I'll try to link about things like body dysmorphia. And I'll see if I can find any examples from her chart that might suggest such a thing. So first, let's look at her sun sign. She was a Pisces. Well, right then and there, you can get a feel for what that would represent. And it just so happens that her midheaven is in Pisces as well. Her sun forms a conjunction with the midheaven, and this is the cusp of the 10th house of career. So her sun was in the 10th house of career. That's at the top of the chart. I do believe that that can be the chart of somebody who becomes famous. Just in general, this is Capricorn's house that it rules, and Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So it is about our status. And when you have the sun here, it does indicate that somebody is a born leader, but I think it's also somebody who can be like a well-known person, like a famous person, a celebrity. Somebody wrote to me and said, no, this is more like the business person or the career person, because it's like having the sun in Capricorn, which is true, but I do believe that this indicates that kind of prominence. And this can be the person who has an audience and has a very well-known name. Donald Trump is one example of a famous person with the sun in the 10th house, but I'm sure there are many others. Now, the thing that jumps out at me more than even that is the fact that her sun is in Pisces. Because, by the way, you look at somebody like Freddie Mercury, he had his sun, if I'm not mistaken, in the 12th house, and he was a Virgo. And I deliberately looked at his chart. I didn't do it for here, but I wanted to see why he was so bombastic. And especially as a Virgo, which is a very nondescript sign, and he had his sun in the 12th house, and he had Virgo rising. I thought maybe he had some Leo there. I mean, that would be perfect. But no, he actually had his sun and his ascendant in Virgo, which is, I think, why he chose the last name as a stage name, Mercury, because he was ruled by Mercury with both his sun and his ascendant. So Karen, being a Pisces, this is a sign, this is the last sign of the zodiac, which is the ruler of the 12th house. She has no planets there. But Pisces is a sign of the victim. Pisces is the sign of the martyr. Now, that's not what Pisces represents in its totality by a long shot. But I find that very interesting that her midheaven was in Pisces, because you could say that she became the victim of her own career. Because I went back right before I pressed record here, I wanted to refresh my memory on how her eating disorder came about. I thought that someone had told her, like, in the media, that she needed to lose, that she was her face was a little chubby. I still thought that I still think that might be a possibility. But from what I read, she didn't like the way that she looked in her costume, and she just like lost a little bit of weight, and then unfortunately she didn't stop there. So you can look at her career as the culprit of her eating disorder. Now, that's not necessarily true, because even if she became an accountant, she could still be, especially if she was looking for a life partner, she might have blamed outer things on the inability to find somebody special for a spouse or a partner. And she might have just been as likely to do that as well. But I think that that is one of the things that may have really been problematic, the fact that she was in the public eye, and that made her more prone to being self-critical about her appearance, because her appearance was equated with her image. Her image meaning, what the public persona that she might have had, which is indicated by the rising sign primarily. So the other thing about Pisces is it's connected to artistic endeavors as well as with spiritual endeavors. So, and I actually think that those two areas of life are quite, they have a lot in common, quite frankly. But in terms of her artistic career, which a midheaven Pisces could indicate, when you look at it from the sense of the martyr, she had to sacrifice herself for her career. It's like the Christ complex with Pisces, the sense of sacrifice. And when a Pisces person identifies with victimhood, it becomes even more difficult to kind of crawl out of that disempowering sense of self. In terms of what I want to touch upon her mother, Karen's moon was in Leo, and the moon can indicate the mother and how the mother behaved towards her daughter, or just how she behaved in general. It doesn't mean that's her sign, her sun sign, but that's how she behaved. Well, we know what Leo represents. Leo is a star in its own right. The performer, larger than life. But it can be the petty tyrant, because if Leo does not have its own dreams to fulfill, this can be the stage mother, actually. And I don't know that there's any evidence that she pushed Karen when she was younger, because I thought that Karen began to perform in college when she was like about 20 or so. I did not read a biography on Karen that would have made all of that very clear to me, but so it's just mere speculation. But in any case, it can be that stage mother, that person who's living vicariously through her child and developing a sense of importance through that. This is one facet of narcissism. The shadow side of Leo in general is narcissism. So it's that self-absorption that is kicked up a notch. And so she did not feel loved by her mother. And in the fourth house of home and family, where that is one of the houses in particular that indicates maybe one's childhood and that home environment, there are two planets that are considered malefic planets in Vedic astrology, Saturn and Mars. Saturn is the lord of karma. The fourth house can be the house of the mother. This can be a house that is very austere, meaning that it's cold. So it might run like a military operation where everything is organized and disciplined. That would be Saturn, but there's a very harsh environment, a very cold environment. So a child like a Pisces child who is uber sensitive will obviously not fare very well here. Somebody else might be okay. And this is important to know because I believe that her brother, Richard, I think that's his name, that he is a Libra. And that is an air sign, and maybe he was more detached about whatever was going on in the family of origin, and it didn't bother him as much the way it did her. So Mars here can indicate all kinds of like drama in the home, or God forbid, in some more extreme cases, it can indicate domestic violence. violence in general, because Mars is the god of war, but certainly conflict. The home may not feel very homey, like a safe haven, a safe space. The home may feel like a battlefield. But with Saturn here, this can indicate an why can't I talk today? Authoritarian parent. I mean, if I didn't know better, and I totally don't know, I would almost think that she was raised by a military man with Saturn and Mars in this fourth house. And Uranus is in her first house, forming a conjunction with the ascendant, which can indicate like maybe a lot of moving, not necessarily staying in one place, which is kind of the definition of an army brat. The family did move from the East Coast to the West Coast when she was of high school age, because her brother was, they wanted to be closer to the music industry. And at that time, she was not known for having any musical talent. That would come a little bit later, when she would pick up the drums and practice every day and become very talented with them, and also study voice with, have a vocal coach and develop her voice. And then she was able to be talented in both areas of music. The fact that she had the moon in Leo is not surprising, because Leo is a sign of creative self-expression. In astrology, it rules the fifth house. And interestingly, in her fifth house, she has Neptune. So that is a ruler of Pisces, her sun sign. So this combination of sun and moon makes a lot of sense artistically. Her Mercury was in Aquarius. She had Venus in Aquarius, Mars in Libra, and her ascendant was 0 degrees of Cancer. Now, interestingly, well, first of all, Pisces is a water sign. So is Cancer. So that can indicate somebody who is very sensitive, as well as somebody who's very psychic, maybe very spiritual, very psychic. And the the water signs as well as the air signs are feminine signs. Earth signs. I think I said air signs. The water and earth are feminine. The fire and air are masculine. She had fire with her moon sign. She had Mercury and Venus in Aquarius. That's air. That's masculine. Her Mars was in Libra. That's masculine. And yet she made a statement in the 70s during the time when women's lib, that was like what I would call the first wave of feminism. I've heard it called the second wave. I don't know what the first wave would be. Maybe the temperance movement of in the turn of the century, leading up to women getting the vote in 1920. I don't know if that was the first one. But in any case, she said that she would cook for her husband because she felt like women knew how to cook more than men did. So she was definitely not in step with the times, and she was more traditional at a time when women were kind of breaking out of those... because she was a drummer, this was an anomaly in terms of her gender. I have only seen, I think, one other female. I'm talking about, maybe in a female group, but in where there's other males. It was just a male-dominated type of, I was going to say profession, but a choice of instruments, so to speak. And And I would say it probably still is. Not to say there haven't been female drummers along the way. There have. That could account for her having Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, at the midheaven, and this forms a conjunction with it. Uranus is at 0 degrees 57 minutes of Cancer, and her ascendant is 0 degrees 34 minutes of Cancer. So a very tight conjunction. And somebody who has this is somebody who seems different in some way, but I mean is also trying to be different, trying not to be cookie cutter. So the fact that she chose that as her instrument is case in point. And I would also say the fact that she was somebody who was a singer as well. You could call it the lead singer, but the band was just her and her brother. And she did not even want to perform straight away. She liked the drums kind of shielding her from the audience. I'm kind of saying that in my own words, so I don't know if I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they asked her to come out because people couldn't see her, on the stage, and I guess she was reluctant. So that may have factored into her eating disorder because maybe she felt more self-conscious. They hired somebody else to do the drumming when they would do their performances so that she could be just singing and she didn't have to concentrate on anything else and be near a drum set. She said that because of her schedule or, the type of profession she had, that she wouldn't marry because she couldn't find people, she couldn't meet people because, she was on the road and all of that all the time. I'm getting this information from Wikipedia, and she became friends with some celebrities, including Dionne Warwick and Petula Clark, and she confided to Olivia Newton-John, who was her friend, that she did want to get married and have a family. But, the thing is that she said in an interview that she did not want to get married simply to be married. Like that wasn't what, that wouldn't motivate her. She had Venus in Aquarius, and I think that is in alignment with that because there's a detached quality with Aquarius. And of course, she had Uranus at her ascendant, so that's like having Aquarius rising. People who have a prominent Aquarius are going to kind of do their own thing, and they almost want to be different and not conform to whatever is the status quo. So she didn't seek that out, the relationship side of things. And she did have Mars in Libra, which would kind of make you think that that would be a big goal of hers, because Mars can be what we pursue. And she did eventually get married. I found that out by looking at Wikipedia, but apparently it didn't last long, and when she passed away, she was not married. Another reason why I think that she had a smothering type of relationship with her own mother is because she had the moon in conjunction with Pluto. The moon can be the mother, and Pluto can be control, power. She had it in the 3rd house, which is the house of communication. I do believe that we can look at this house as, for people who are singers, And because I do feel that that is a form of communication, it's a musical communication. So to have this conjunction of the moon and Pluto, it can really indicate someone whose emotions are very strong and communicated through that medium. And the thing about her vocals is that there's a very melancholy sound to them. And I would say that that is because of her sun in Pisces, but also that emotion could be traced to this conjunction as well. Also, the third house is the house of the mind, so it can indicate that a person has very strong emotions that affect them mentally. As a matter of fact, she had an opposition between her moon and Mercury, which in astrology rules the third house. And so that to me suggests someone who can experience something where her emotions affect her thinking processes. Is that the proper way of saying? And what I mean by that is you can have emotions and then you can have the ability, like she had Mercury in Aquarius, which is an air sign, can be very analytical and very detached, but her moon was in the opposite sign of Leo, which is much more emotional, albeit not the same as water energy like Pisces, but certainly can still be even like a bit hot-headed, although I don't know that, I don't necessarily think that she had a temper or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I think that having Mars in Libra as well as the Sun in Pisces made it probable that she found it hard to assert herself and to express anger. Mars can be your anger. In Libra, the person may be ashamed of their anger, may feel like anger is a bad thing. It's a mean thing to be angry. And so that kind of person may be passive aggressive, or unfortunately, I think even turning it on themselves and like self-abuse. Even though you can say that the reason she developed an eating disorder may have had nothing to do with that initially, then it became the way that she could distract herself, with that control. But also, I will say that's very interesting because Mars can be what drives us. And in Libra, there can be that desire for beauty. I think when I talked about body dysmorphia and kind of those things like eating disorders, but it can be like plastic surgery sometimes, where the person has a distorted, view of themselves, trying to be beautiful is definitely one of the goals that they get horribly wrong. But I could see somebody with Mars in Libra being driven to improve her looks in the way that she saw fit. And it's also worth noting that she had a conjunction between Mars and Neptune, which means that the person may be delusional and misguided in whatever it is that she's pursuing. She doesn't realize that what she's pursuing is, like some kind of illusion. And, that desire for perfection that I think Neptune can indicate through that idealistic goal can be something that is ever elusive. The ascendant, in her case, 0 degrees of Cancer, which means it was on the cusp with Gemini, can indicate the person's demeanor, how they behave around other people, and what the ruler is. In this case, the ruler is the moon. So that can indicate moodiness, where the person wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, and so they wear their heart on their sleeve, and it also makes them very vulnerable. And I would say, especially, we would say hypersensitive. I remember reading somewhere that cancer is a sign its greatest fear is being ridiculed. So that self-consciousness may come out with one's appearance when it's on the ascendant, because it's the cusp of the first house of the body. And she also had an opposition between the moon and Jupiter. So I have a feeling that her feelings, that she blew them up. Now, is that the same as bipolar disorder? I don't know exactly if I would go that far. Usually, the thing that I have seen as one example, I read somewhere that the greatest indication of bipolar disorder is an opposition between the moon and Pluto. And that's because it can be wild mood swings, extreme, what we would call extreme mood swings. In her particular case, the opposition is not there. There's a conjunction between the moon and Pluto, and an opposition between the moon and Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet of expansion, excess, and also it is associated with jovial emotions. Jove is Jupiter, so it's going to be cheerfulness, but an opposition is like a seesaw. So it can be that the person kind of bounces back and forth, and it doesn't seem like it would necessarily be stable because of this. So it might be somebody who blows up their emotions. They feel something, and then it becomes the nth degree. Now, because the moon is in Leo, this can really heighten that self-dramatic type of emotional self-expression. And I'm not suggesting that she was not feeling her feelings and that she was just being a drama queen, but simply that you're talking about somebody whose sun is in a water sign, like Pisces. And so to have a moon in a very larger than life sign like Leo can, and forming an opposition to Jupiter, may have meant that her feelings were exaggerated, and that goes for her feelings that were maybe against herself. Like she might have assumed that something was the truth simply because she felt it. In a similar way, people do that when their minds are front and center, like somebody whose sun is in air, and maybe they even have a moon in an air sign or Mercury in air, and they worship or they give way too much power to their thoughts. Just because you think a thought doesn't mean it's a valid one. Sometimes people have very distorted thinking, just like they have very distorted feelings. So this was likely one of the reasons why she felt things deeper than maybe someone else did, like her brother, who I do believe is still alive. I could be wrong, but I think he's still alive, because he was or is a Libra, which is an air sign, and capable of detachment a lot easier. In her fifth house of love, she has Neptune. I was reading about her brief marriage where her husband was borrowing money from her. And, even though she did get divorced, she supposedly left him the house in her will. And that's another thing that I think a combination like this, and then I'm talking about the sun moon in Pisces Leo, and then having Neptune, the fifth house, can lead to maybe even financial exploitation or some type of exploitation, because Leo is a very generous sign. Pisces is a very gullible sign. And if anybody listening is a Pisces, this is not meant to insult. The gullibility factor is there because the person is very idealistic. And there can be a very strong purity within the person. So their take on something is going to typically be based on what their perceptions are, based on their own experiences in life. So with Pisces, you can get somebody who is like the nun or the monk. And the nun or the monk is, a pious individual. And people who are high souls, they naturally assume that everybody else operates in the same way. Little do they know how off base that is. I see here that she had Venus in the 8th house. That suggests to me a soulmate, and that because she was a Pisces, she may have sensed that there was somebody that she had not met, that she was meant to be with. Sometimes I think that people who don't have a sense of urgency about finding a partner, even, though she was in her early 30s when she passed, and she was not with anyone at that time, she probably was content to wait for the right person. Had she lived, of course she's not dead as far as I'm concerned, but on this earth plane, I should say, when she might have stayed on this earth plane. And who knows, maybe she would have found her soulmate when she was 40 and still had the family that she wanted to have. But in any case, I find that very curious that she had Venus in the 8th house, but I do think that that suggests that she was looking for the whole package, because if you have Venus in the 8th house, you want that other person, your beloved, you want them body, mind, and soul. You do not want a pale imitation of love. So there was something else I wanted to mention. Well, just a couple of things. Her Chiron was in the 6th house of health, and it was in the sign of Sagittarius. We have to look at both of these elements. Chiron is the wounded healer, and this can indicate the sensitive area for the individual and how the way out for their healing. Now, it's curious that's in the 6th house of health, because this is what did her in terms of diet. The 6th house can actually be diet. It's health in general, but Mercury rules the 6th in astrology, and it can be the diet. So that was her downfall. And the 6th house opposes the 12th house of the mystical side of life. She doesn't have any planets there, so it isn't aspected, but it is the practical side of life, the 6th house. And Sagittarius is here, so that indicates the person who wants freedom. So I don't know her path to stardom, if she had to go through a lot. I read part of a book on her life, and I think it did kind of cover those early years, so I wish I could have retained that information better. But that really makes me think. Because Sagittarius is a sign of freedom, And here she has Chiron and Sag, so she did not feel free. And that was something that she used, and this is where her health comes in. She used her diet as a way to control her herself and to feel free. Um, this is a theory about anorexia, is that when you have an overbearing mother, that may lead to anorexia. Is that true? Well, it might be in part true. Um, However, I do think that there are multiple facets to that. I don't think everybody naturally does that. And I think that she lived at home until she was about 24, if I'm not mistaken. And the thing is, and I can't remember if her brother did as well. Sometimes you see these kinds of things happening. That's not necessarily that there's anything wrong with that, but if the parent is very controlling, then that could indicate narcissistic abuse from the parent, because a parent may be overly protective, and the child, even though this is an adult person, has gotten the meaning of life as being living with their parents, and that is in the benefit of the parents, who then can continue to exert control on somebody who's an adult already. You might have a narcissistic parent, but then the child turns 18 and they're like, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. And that's not the same vibe as what is happening here. Of course, I don't have the inside information about whether or not she kind of fought back in terms of anything that they tried to put on her, but I'm glad that the chart can show some of these tendencies. I want to state also that Neptune, the fifth house, can be someone who is an artist, because Neptune can be illusion and fifth house can be creativity, or maybe, any kind of creative self-expression. So it's like the person, the illusionist, if you will, who, it's almost like casting a spell on people and creating this alternate reality within the world of theater and other types of performance. It can be quite imaginative for sure. So I feel like there's so much I could say. Her North Node was in Aries and was in the 10th house of career. So it just seems like it was destined for her to be one of those people who future astrologers may point out, still she stood the test of time in terms of her voice. She never went out of style. As a matter of fact, I think in recent years she has gained, because the access to the internet has allowed people to get turned on to her for the first time, who might be on the younger side, or just somebody like me. I wasn't a spring chicken when I started listening to her songs. And yeah, so anyway, that's what I have for you. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, one thing I wanted to say about the North Node in Aries is being your own person. And it is in the 10th house of career. So sometimes people are much more likely to be whatever they're told to be, whatever they're shaped to be, because they just want to become successful, which the 10th house can represent. But this is on your own terms. So, I think sometimes self-destructive acts are done in the spirit of wanting to be autonomous and whatnot, and she um, definitely had several placements that indicated that she wanted to be free. And so um, I think that, life is this giant classroom, and hopefully she has learned, why she did what she did and how to navigate in the future. If you'd like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.